Good afternoon to everyone who's joining us for this webinar this afternoon with Consolidated Planning Group. I want to thank everyone for joining us today on Tuesday. Before we start, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Partners Resource Network, because we're doing this collaborative webinar with Allison Schaberg of Consolidated Planning Group. Partners Resource Network is a nonprofit that is funded through the Office of Special Education Programs. We are the Parent Training and Information Center of Texas. There are 4 projects that cover the entire state of Texas. If you are watching us from a different part of Texas, Path Project is in Houston, but we have Team Project, Penn Project, PACT, and also Path Project. So we cover the entire state of Texas. If you don't know who your regional coordinator is, you can reach out to our different projects and locate who that regional coordinator is. Our mission is to empower parents and professionals with information to navigate the special education process and also put them in contact with resources. We serve families of 0 to 26, children of 0 to 26, and also youth self-advocates from 14 to 26. All of our programs are free. We offer technical assistance. We offer curriculum and training for families of children with disabilities, and also we offer a youth leadership program. All of these services are provided free of cost. I encourage you to visit our website at www.partnerstx.org. We have a lot of free resources on our website. You can also look at our calendar of events, and our calendar of events has the different trainings that we offer on different topics. We're so excited about collaborating with different organizations to bring information that parents are requesting and wanting to know more about, and also professionals that work with our population. So I just want to thank everyone again for joining us, and also remind you that if you have questions during the webinar, you can put them at the bottom of your screen. There is a Q&A box, and you can click on that and put the questions in there, because we will have some time at the end so that Allison can take your questions. So without further ado, I'm passing this over to Allison. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Always nice to see you once again. We love partnering with Partners Resource Network. Are you going to start recording as well?
I'm recording.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
So hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. If you are new to Consolidated Planning Group, we're happy that you're here today. We aim to really put out some educational events surrounding special needs, and today we're going to be talking about Government Benefits 101. So this is a topic, maybe you've listened to it before, maybe you've listened to different speakers on this before, but it's a topic that I would say it's truly convoluted, and you can't hear it the first time and process all of it, because there's so many things to consider, so many things that sound similar that actually aren't. So we're going to dissect some of that today. So as Anna said, if you have questions today, we aim to get to as many questions as possible. Anna, if you would just watch the chat box for us today and the questions, and I'm happy to take questions as they come along. And if we're running out of time towards the end, then we may save the other questions to the end. But go ahead and put your questions in the chat box. And then today's meeting is being recorded, and so we will put out an email probably today or tomorrow with the recording and a link of how to contact us, how to schedule an appointment, things like that. So Allison Schaberg, Consolidated Planning Group. Consolidated Planning Group is a holistic special needs financial planning firm. I come to you as a professional, but also as a parent. I have 2 kids with disabilities. One has basically aged out and kind of, crossed over into transition services and kind of beyond. And then I have one child that is still a minor. So navigating all of these things starts getting pretty confusing, especially when the child's about 17. We're looking at that magic age of turning 18. So we put these webinars out on purpose to give you the tools and resources that you need to be successful, to put the information in your hands, to be able to ask the right questions, to advocate and do the next right thing for your child and for your family. So we do have a YouTube channel. All of our recordings are out there on the YouTube channel, so you can watch them as needed. And there's basically anything that we're going to talk about today, there's probably a whole webinar on that specific topic. Okay. So I think I already hit on this a little bit. We're a holistic special needs financial planning firm. We have over 27 years of experience. We are an advisory and a consulting firm, so we can work with the professionals that you already have in place. And we predominantly serve families with special needs, as well as agencies, professionals, and physicians that serve them. Okay, so as we're talking about government benefits today, some of the things that as we're planning for special needs, we're thinking about how will our child's care be funded. And there's a lot of ways that we fund care for our special needs children through trust, through life insurance, through things like that as far as, extensive care. But what about the ongoing and the monthly needs for our kids? So first things first, what we want to talk about is state and federally funded programs. We first talking about SSI and Medicaid. So a lot of families don't qualify. So although your child is disabled, a lot of families do not qualify for SSI and Medicaid right away. Maybe they didn't qualify at all. The entire upbringing of your special needs child, maybe you didn't qualify. Maybe they said you made too much money. And it's not hard to do. It's not hard to have too many assets in the eyes of SSI because SSI is a means-based test. So basically what they say is the individual has to be disabled, and we're going to talk about what constitutes being disabled. But it's a means-based test, so they want you to have no more than $2,000 assets in your name. You can have one car and one house. Married couples can have 3,000 assets in their name. They can have one car and one house. So what I mean here is as your child has been growing up and they're not 18 yet, so from birth to 17, if you had more assets than this, more than one car, more than one house, your child likely didn't qualify and they weren't getting SSI and Medicaid. So because at the time, from birth to 17, it's based off of your assets, not the child's. So what happens is when the child turns 18, it becomes based off of their assets, not the parents, okay? So again, the child turns 18, maybe you were denied SSI and Medicaid previously, not because they didn't say that your child was disabled, but just basically you failed the means-based test. So what is important to know here is if you've never applied, you should apply the month that your child turns 18, and there's some caveats to that, which we'll talk about. You should apply the month that your child turns 18. If your child is already getting SSI and Medicaid when they turn 18, they need to go through a redetermination or kind of an eligibility. You're going to have a phone call with them, and they're going to kind of go through that process of switching over to the adult-based. So then what we want to talk about here is SSDI and RSDI. So some people I hear say, oh yeah, my child gets Social Security. Now, clearly, some kids do. Adult disabled children do get Social Security, or they get RSDI under a parent's record. But usually when they're saying that, they're actually referring that their child is getting SSI and Medicaid. So SSDI is the worker, okay? SSDI is the worker. You, as employees, we work and we pay in to the Social Security system. So this is Social Security. So Social Security is also known as Social Security Disability. So SSDI the Retirement Survivors Disability Benefit is the RSDI in Medicare. So oftentimes what happens when a person applies for SSI and SSDI at first, usually the SSDI denial letter comes, and some people are very upset by this. Like, how could they possibly say that my child isn't disabled? Is this some kind of bad joke? But really what that letter saying, you know, you're being declined for SSDI is the child's being declined because either mom or dad is not already retired or disabled through the Social Security Administration, and said disabled child doesn't have a work record. They don't have working credits under their name. So they were, you know, determined ineligible for SSDI or RSDI, which is true. But what happens is usually after that letter comes, the SSI approval letter comes. So people think that they're getting denied for everything, when in fact they're rightly being denied for the SSDI because the child does not have working credits. So once a person, so how do they get SSDI and RSDI? We're going to talk about that a little bit more, but basically they have some working credits under their name. Initially, it's 6 working credits where they might switch over to their own record. A person can be dual eligible. They can get SSI and RSDI, Medicaid and Medicare. SSDI and RSDI, Medicare comes 2 years after you're eligible for either SSDI or RSDI. Medicaid comes right away with SSI. Okay. Okay. So I have something in the chat box that says, yes, we are. So I had somebody mention that we want to talk about the accounts to preserve eligibility for these things. So when we talk about, keeping your eligibility for state and federally funded programs, the truth is when you're disabled, you're getting SSI and Medicaid, there are rules about and money in the right buckets and where you can have money so you don't disqualify for SSI and Medicaid. And we are going to go deeper and wider with that during this presentation. Okay, so when should you apply and what do you need to apply for? So apply for SSI the month of your child's 18th birthday, and it should be scheduled a few months in advance. So previously, the Social Security office was taking in-person appointments, and the Social Security offices have remained closed through COVID. So they're working, but they're working by telephone, and they're only scheduling emergency face-to-face meetings. So emergency meetings would be like somebody's died. I mean, it has to be a true emergency. But your local Social Security office may be backed up for months. So if your child's birthday, for instance, is in November, I might call in August or September and schedule the appointment for the month that they turn 18. It doesn't have to be the day after their birthday. Anytime during the calendar month that they actually turn 18 should be fine. You want to have evidence that demonstrates that the child's disability began before age 22 to qualify as a disabled adult child. They're now called children disability benefits, but forever and ever, and what the term that most people are familiar with is disabled adult child under a parent's record. So again, what this means is you have to have evidence that demonstrates that the disability began before 22. I've had people ask, well, gosh, I didn't know that. My son's 25 now. Can we still get, the childhood, disability benefits under a parent's record? And the answer is yes. You just have to prove that the disability started prior to 22. So when you're applying, a couple of the things that you might do is gather medical history, physician's name, address, phone number, diagnosis history, and medications. You definitely want the PCP, the primary care physician, and also any other additional doctors that are seen for any other types of critical conditions or specialty care. It might be cardiology, it could be neurology, oftentimes it could be psychology, psychiatry. But have, the diagnosis history, what the dates of the diagnosis were, etc. The other thing that I would mention to you is I would also consider chatting with the PCP first and reviewing their records. In our digital age, things can be wrong. Medical records are wrong all the time. It could be an inadvertent error. It could be somebody else's record mixed up with yours, etc. And what I would recommend is just calling the PCP's office and say, you know, we're getting ready to apply for SSI, and they're going to be requesting the medical records. And I would like to see if these were requested today, what is sent. And so that way you can review. And what you're reviewing for is to make sure that the record clearly identifies what the diagnoses are, what the limitations are, etc. This is where we want it to be crystal clear. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what you're looking to prove. And if there isn't proper language in that medical record that clearly identifies what that disability is, what the limitations are, the inabilities are as a result of that disability, then just simply talk to the physician about correcting that and updating that. So I actually did this with my own daughter, and I was actually surprised. There was some things that were just wrong. It was just inadvertent, and there were some things that just weren't in the record at all. So although it seems like kind of tedious, it could be the difference of you being denied, your child being denied, or being approved. It's possible. So I think it's worth, you know, a little bit of effort to go there. Okay, so the Social Security Blue Book, if you're taking notes, write this down. The Social Security Blue Book, you might want to grab that, that link right there, and you can pull up the Social Security Blue Book. This is basically an impairment guide, like the impairment guide that the Social Security Administration uses, and it basically tells you, based off of diagnosis, what you have to prove to be considered disabled in the eyes of Social Security. And it, you know, your child may have multiple disabilities, so you're going to look at those multiple sections. So when you're reviewing that PCP record, you want to go back and say, am I able to decide if, like, neurologically that they have disorganization of more than 2 limbs or something like that, whatever the book says. So you're going to look up your child's diagnosis, and you're going to see what you have to prove, and you want to see if your medical record is actually proving that. So the Blue Book is your friend, and this is something that you can do a little bit of homework on the front end, so that way you make sure that your process goes a little bit smoother. Anna, do we have some questions?
Yes, you do have some questions in the chat box. The first question is at the top. If the child is approved for SSI after 18 years for any reason, say when she is 19 years old, will the child get the SSI benefits from the date he or she becomes 18?
Yes, they can go backwards, and I've seen them go backwards pretty regularly, kind of backdate it to the age of 18. There is a limit to that, so I don't know, like, if you're 25 that they're going to go back to age 18, but they typically do go back to the age of 18 if the disability started prior to then.
Okay. And then you have another question. It says, my son is 11 years old and has high functioning autism. When do I apply for SSI? He also has ADHD and anxiety.
Okay, so that's a good question, and that's going to go back to the beginning. So at 11 years old, he's still a minor. And so that means SSI, again, SSI is a means-based program. So you have to be disabled and you have to be indigent. And in order to be considered indigent, if you're a single mom, you can have $2,000 in your name. You can have 1 house and 1 car. If you're married, you can have $3,000 to your name. And you can have 1 house and 1 car. So, and this is everything. When I say to your name, this is your 401k, this is mutual funds, this is savings account, checking account, any kind of assets, CDs, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, everything all combined. So if your assets are below the number that I just mentioned, and your child has all of those diagnoses, then you can certainly you can certainly apply and then likely qualify for SSI and Medicaid. There are a number, there's 103 Medicaid programs out there. So one of the things that I want to tell you, and Anna probably has some resources for this as well, there's 103 Medicaid programs out there. So even though if your child is a minor and your assets are over that amount, your child may still qualify for Medicaid. There's all kinds of different programs that your child may qualify for Medicaid, but not qualify for SSI. So it is important to know that. So go ahead and apply if your assets are under that number. I mean, you can apply if your assets are over that number, but you're not going to get approved for SSI. Okay, next question.
That was the last question that was in the chat box.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so there are a number of presumptive disability conditions. So typically when you're starting the Social Security process of you know, taking an application, doing the application, going through the approval process and everything, I say tell yourself it's going to take 6 months. So then when it takes 3 months, you feel happy, okay? So 3 to 6 months. It's reasonable to think that your application could take 3 to 6 months to process. They weren't fast before COVID. They got slower with COVID. Some offices are better than others. And one thing that I didn't mention back there that is important, I want to say this to you. Choose wisely on the Social Security office that you choose to work with to begin with when you start that application process. As special needs parents, we're friends with other special needs parents. Other people have applied for SSI. They've had either a good experience or a bad experience with the local Social Security office. Basically, the office you start with, you stay with. So if you happen to pick the worst office in the greater area, you're stuck with that one. So ask around and find out who's had a really great experience at any other particular office and start at that one. It's very, very important. Okay, so these presumptive conditions. So I said it could take 3 to 6 months for your SSI application to get approved. And in the meantime, then they're not paying you. But there are, you know, a number of presumptive conditions that right off the bat that it's presumptively approved, that it's going to be approved, and they may start payments sooner versus later as they're going through the process. Some of the ones that stick out, mostly total blindness, no light perception in either eye, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, IDD. You know, those are some of the ones that stick out. So you can Google the presumptive disability list for a long list of others. There's a lot of them. But basically, under the presumptive disability, you can get up to 6 months of SSI based off of the disability if it has one of 15 conditions. And this determination is always going to be made by the local Social Security office, not the national number. And if there is a likelihood that the case would be approved, then they can make that presumptive decision, is the bottom line with that. Okay, so benefits when a parent retires, becomes disabled, or passes away. So when a parent applies to receive their own Social Security benefits through retirement or disability, the disabled adult child, again, I'm using that old term, disabled adult child, is entitled to receive half of the parent's benefits. So in that example, if the parent's benefit is $3,000, the child would be entitled to receive $1,500. And this also applies to children that are not disabled. So if we have minor children that are not disabled and the parent retires or goes on Social Security disability, then they're entitled to a benefit. And then disabled adult children would be entitled to this. Now, it is important to know that there is such thing as a family maximum. So in that example, that same $1,500, let's say there's 3 kids, there's 2 minors, and then there's a disabled adult child. Each of the 3 would get $500 instead of the $1,500. And mom or dad's benefit is not reduced. It's just kind of how this works. So again, 24 months after receiving these Title II benefits, the disabled adult child will be eligible for Medicare. What's important to understand is how this works. So 50% for basically their lifetime. And what happens like when they're getting RSDI, SSDI, if you're dual eligible for SSI, means-based, SSDI or RSDI, the working quarter based, right? It kind of offsets. So it just depends on how much of a retirement benefit or RSDI that you're eligible for, that the child is eligible for, and their SSI benefits. So there could be any combination. In fact, there's very many combinations. Some people will switch over completely to RSDI and still stay Medicaid qualified, and then they'll get their Medicare. Some people have a combination of payments of both the RSDI and a reduced SSI, et cetera. So everybody's situation is a little bit different. But what happens is, so as long as the adult child remains disabled, when a parent passes away, that child will receive 75% of the deceased parent's Social Security for as long as they live and remain disabled. So again, 50% of your work record. So this is awesome because our kids, a lot of them don't have a work record. So 50% while you're alive, you have to turn your benefits on first, or your spouse. And you can flip this around between parents. So let's say, for instance, mom turns her benefits on first and he's entitled to 50%. But then later, 5 years later, dad retires and dad's benefit is much greater than mom's benefit. We can switch over to dad's record and he can get 50% of dad's record once dad turns it on as well. Anna, do we have some additional questions?
Yes, you have quite a few questions in the chat box.
Okay.
There's some that had come in when I had said that there were no more, and definitely we have some in the chat box. There's one that says back benefits. My daughter's SSI back pay went back to when we submitted an application. I think it's more of a statement on that one.
I've seen that.
Can you see that
where
one?
They went.
Yeah.
Yes, I have seen that, like the application date. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then there's one that says, my son has been approved for SSI due to his autism. Will they ever drop his SSI?
Okay, so that's a loaded question. So it's a loaded question because of working. So basically, if your son with autism, anybody, a disabled adult child, begins working, okay, and they're making more than the substantial gainful amount, which this year for 2021 is $13.10 per month. So basically, in the eyes of Social Security, a person is not disabled if they can make $13.10 a month or more. So while we always encourage, if you can work or if you can get vocationally trained or they can learn a skill or have some outside activity where they're earning money and stuff like that, we definitely promote that. But you definitely could lose SSI if you're working and you're earning more than the $13.10 per month and would no longer be considered a disabled adult child.
Okay. The next question is, my son is 17 years old, getting SSI, and just passed a very long SSA medical evaluation and approval of disability status. I believe probably what comes next after that. Can you see
they
that
may
question?
Still, it's kind of silly, and they may still do a redetermination. You still need to call and have an appointment for the month that they turn 18. They may take the recertification and they may not. So I kind of went through this process with my daughter, and it seems like some of the stuff that we were doing was duplicative. Sometimes they're efficient and sometimes they're not, but for sure, that the whole age 18, everything changes at age 18 does matter. So you do need to go ahead and call and get that scheduled for when they turn 18, and they will send a letter. The other thing is just because a person is approved a disabled adult child, even if they have a permanent disability, it's not a slam dunk that they'll always remain and always be getting SSI. They'll always be considered disabled, and that working thing definitely matters. And then also, some will do a medical, so sometimes they'll do a financial redetermination, and if they see that you have more means than what we talked about earlier, then they can you can disqualify for that reason. Sometimes they'll do a medical redetermination, and if the doctor seems to think that your loved one is less disabled or is not disabled anymore, then they could say that you are no longer eligible because you don't qualify medically anymore. So that, you know, kind of the same things apply for any of those redeterminations. I have gone through those with my own child, and it's a pain, but we haven't ever had anybody, you know, she didn't get denied, they didn't cancel her or anything like that. But you will get letters in the mail. And one of the things that I will tell you, and sometimes it's overwhelming, sometimes I'm like, how much mail can they send us? You need to read those 7-page letters that they send you, and read the details and do what they say to do within the time frame that they say to do it. Do not mess around. This is not something that you put on the shelf and forget about or you walk away from, because you will get your benefits stopped that way for sure. Okay, so let me see here.
Have some other questions as well.
So will my son have Medicaid after age 18? So again, there's 103 Medicaid programs, and I don't know how or why your son has Medicaid, if as a family you qualify financially, or if he qualifies through one of the disability programs. But again, you've got to go through that redetermination again. Everything changes when they turn 18. The family maximums are very low. They're not really. They can be up to it's like 180%. I believe it's 100. Between the range is 160, but between 160 and 180% of the parents' benefit. When we're talking about RSDI and family maximums come into play also when we have a spouse that maybe didn't work and might be drawing off of the parent's record. So we might have a disabled adult child, we might have a spouse. In some cases, people have 2 disabled adult children. So that's where the family maximums come into play. And it's not the biggest deal if we have a 2-income household and 2 people were, you know, building their own Social Security record, but it's not horrible. So there are a such thing as family maximums. They have increased over the last couple of years. Do you have a listing of the 103 Medicaid services? So I believe it's the HHS website. Anna, you might chime in on this. The 103 Medicaid services. So when you go into the HHS website, if you apply for Medicaid, basically you put in all of your information, and then it's a time-consuming process, by the way. But you put in your information for the child or whatever, and it's going to tell you, it will come up electronically what programs your child may qualify for. There is also, and Anna, you might put this in the chat box too, there is also an 800 number to call them. The hold times are usually an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, to your inconvenience and mine too. But they open up at 8 a.m. and guess what? Nobody calls them at 8 a.m. So if you need to call them, my recommendation is calling them around the 8 o'clock hour, Monday through Friday. Okay, if the matter of guardianship is not fully resolved by the time the child turns 18, does that affect the parent ability to help their child with the Social Security recertification process? So the interesting thing, that's a really great question. Thanks for asking that one. And it doesn't come up, that question specifically doesn't come up all the time. So the interesting thing, since we're talking about Social Security today, is it's a government entity. And the thing that you got to know with a government entity is they have their own rules. They march to the beat of their own drum, and everything else that we know you can just throw it out the window. Okay, that's not how it works with the federal government. So the good news is if you don't have your guardianship in place yet, you actually don't even have to have guardianship in place for the Social Security Administration. We are nationally certified Social Security advisors, and so some of the things that we've learned along the way is there's a specific form that will, I believe it's the 1696. I'd have to look up the exact form, but you can look it up. There's a form that you can be the designated payee for your loved one. So if we have a loved one with intellectual disabilities, they can't manage their finances and won't be able to, you can do the designated payee form. You're kind of their designated person. And there is also another form, I actually think it's the 1696, that will allow you to speak on your child's behalf. They don't take guardianship. They don't care about your guardianship. They don't care about your supported decision-making agreement. They don't care about your power of attorney or your healthcare power of attorney. So that's what I was saying, is the government entity has their own forms and their own rules. So basically you just fill those forms out and you get those forms in, and you won't have any problem with that whatsoever. So, okay, so I see that we've got the, so it is the Texas HHS, and I think she put that in the chat, the chat box. She's got a link for the Texas HHS in there, and she also put the phone number to them as well. So thank you for that. Okay, so that was a really, really great question, and I'm glad we did that, because again, it matters. And I've actually had families before that they were frustrated, like, what do you mean you don't care about the power of attorney? And what do you mean you don't care about the guardianship? It's a legal document. Are you kidding me? And the answer is no, they're not kidding. They have their own form. And so it just doesn't even matter. So we will talk a little bit about guardianship in a second as well. Okay. So the Title II programs, some of the things that we've talked about, SSA, the Social Security Retirement Benefits, RSDI is Retirement Survivors and Disability Insurance. So this, so this is kind of where we were talking about, is if you retire and you have a disabled adult child, they can qualify for RSDI. If a parent dies, and the child or the adult child is disabled, then they qualify for those benefits. SSDI, the Social Security Disability Insurance, you as the worker, as you're paying in, like you download your Social Security statement, you see how many working credits you have. It's 10 years, it's 40 quarters, okay? So 10 years is 40 quarters. And then the term that we use is disabled adult child. And I'm using it, again, they've changed it a little bit to call it childhood disability benefits and away from disabled adult child. But there's a lot of people that have worked for the Social Security Administration for many, many, many years. They still use the term. It's a common term that you may have already heard. And you'll probably still hear because it was around forever. And then the DWB is the Disabled Widower Benefits. So this is where a spouse passes away and there are widower benefits available as well. Okay, so an adult receiving Title II benefits is also known as a beneficiary. We hear that term a lot with life insurance, but they are also known as a beneficiary. Okay. So to be entitled to the SSDI, you file an application, you have to be found medically disabled, you have to be fully insured. So if you're a worker, you're the worker, you're the insured for disability status, and you're basically not working or working, but countable income is less than the substantial gainful activity, which for 2021 is $1,310 per month. That is one other thing I didn't mention earlier. It is also suggested that when you're applying for SSI, that you're not working at the time of the application, because if you're working, if the child is working, then they must not be disabled, and they can be automatically denied right away just for being employed when applying for SSI. So it is also important to know that. Okay, let's see. Okay, I see a question. It says, if parents divorced and dad doesn't see adult disabled child, does son still have rights to dad's benefits? Yes, he does. And there also can be situations as well. So dad's benefits, mom's benefits, it could be step parents. If you have a guardianship or kind of a living arrangement with a grandparent, I mean, I've seen adopted cases and things like that, but it also could be the step parent. And my advice to you is to do whichever record is the highest, right? So even if dad isn't in the picture, then, you know, just proving who dad is and knowing the Social Security number, the Social Security Administration can look that up. Dad doesn't get to approve it. It doesn't hurt his benefit anyway. So it's, yeah, that's a great question. Okay, so to be entitled to the retirement survivor and disability insurance is the child's 18 years of age or older. The disability began before age 22, is a dependent of the insured worker, is not married, and has not previously performed any substantial gainful activity. Now, one of the things that I want you to know is the substantial gainful activity changes, that amount, that $13.10 per month, changes each year. So you'd have to go back and make sure that they didn't have substantial gainful activity for the previous years of 18 and forward. So just it doesn't change much. Like I think last year, if it's I think it might have been $12.94 last year, and it is $13.10 this year. That's kind of the example of the change. The other way to be entitled to the survivor RSDI is if you have minor children, they don't have to be disabled, and the worker dies, the parent, one of the parents dies. That's the other way. So minor children, they don't have to be disabled, or adult children 18 years or older whose disability began prior to age 22 is how that works. Okay, so the Social Security Red Book. So we've talked about the Blue Book. Now I want to talk about the Red Book. This is basically everything that you ever needed or wanted to know about working on while getting Social Security disability and SSI. There's all kinds of, this is the many different programs that are out there. Social Security, like one of the Medicaid programs is the Ticket to Work program. Ticket to Work also will work hand in hand with the Texas Workforce Commission and vocational rehab. We have a whole video on vocational rehab and that kind of thing. And we actually have a whole webinar with Andy Hardwick with the Social Security Administration talking about working while receiving benefits. So if your child is in vocational rehab or any kind of work program, you want to familiarize yourself with this. And what I would tell you is there are differences on how much you can make and what happens if you're getting SSI, and how much you can make and what happens if you're getting SSDI or RSDI. And then it gets more convoluted if your child is dual eligible and they're actually getting SSI and RSDI and Medicaid and Medicare. But maintaining your eligibility for Medicaid really, really matters. We talk about the waivers in Texas and the interest list in Texas, and we talk about the long list, but so you may be receiving a waiver already, which you need to maintain your Medicaid eligibility. But you may be on the list and will come up for the waiver in the future. So Medicaid does matter. This is where I have people say, well, what do we care about Medicaid? We have great health insurance. We don't need this. We don't really like the doctors in there anyway. What do we care about that? And the Medicaid eligibility is necessary to qualify for any additional waivers that you might be eligible for in the future. So you can download the Social Security Red Book. So we've talked about the Blue Book as the impairment guide, the Red Book as working while getting benefits and how not to mess that up. Read it. Spend some time and really read it and go deeper and wide. Again, if you have a child that is definitely not going to work or will never be able to work, then I don't know how necessary that is for you. Okay. So how do you protect these benefits and make sure you don't lose them? We've talked about kind of the money and the amounts and preserving eligibility. But basically, the first things first, if you got to make sure that you have your assets in the right buckets and your child's assets in the appropriate buckets. So when I say that, one of the things that I wanted to mention, because this comes up every single time, so let's say my disabled adult child has more than $2,000 in his name and I want to apply for SSI. What do I do? Can I just move the money? Okay, so that's what comes up every time. So the answer is there's no hiding of things, okay? There's no hiding. So what you can do is you can spend down the money. Does the individual need a car? Do they need a computer? Do they need an iPhone? Is there some educational stuff that needs to happen? Some tutoring, some books? Basically, you can spend down the money, but just show that you have receipts for those expenses. Another thing is you can have money in an ABLE account. We're going to talk about that in a minute. You can have money in a special needs trust. So you also want to ensure that your special needs family member is not set up as a beneficiary on any life insurance, investment, or bank accounts. So there's, while it is true that our kids that have care needs for the rest of their life, it is expensive and we do need to prepare for that financially. But there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. The wrong way is to name them as a straight up beneficiary and the money's going to go to them, because as soon as they get more than $2,000 in their name, then they disqualify for from SSI and Medicaid. So the right way to do this, and so let's just use the made up name, a fictitious name of John Smith. So instead of naming John Smith as a beneficiary on your life insurance contract, basically you need to have a third party special needs trust. And it would say the supplemental needs trust for the benefit of John Smith, or the third party special needs trust for the benefit of John Smith. That's how we do this. And we make sure that John Smith is getting the money for his future care, but it did not disqualify him from any particular benefits. This one right here, the ensure well-meaning family members do not leave assets to the named individual. This is also very important because grandma and grandpa, our parents, they love our kids. They want to help. Maybe they have extra, or upon their death, they want to leave money to their grandchild. So this is where, as your child or as their child, or if they're in-laws or whatever, you're going to have that conversation with them. They're not attending these webinars like you are. They don't understand about third-party special needs trusts and all these qualifications and disqualifications for SSI and Medicaid and et cetera, and waivers and all these other things. They just want to help. So having these deliberate, intentional conversations will help. It will help them leave money to the third-party special needs trust for the benefit of the said family member, as opposed to them outright. In the example that this does not get done, so grandma and grandpa have left money directly to your child. Grandma and grandpa passes away. Your child inherits $250,000 in their name directly. Oh my gosh, what do we do? Okay, so basically what you're going to do at that point, you're going to meet with a special needs attorney, and they're going to ask a judge to redirect that money to a first party special needs trust. So there's different types of trusts. We have whole webinars on this. First party special needs trust is their money. It's money they earned, money they received from a settlement or things like that, money that wasn't directed to a third party special needs trust. There is a Medicaid payback on a first party special needs trust. So basically, if your child dies, Medicaid comes in and takes back what they feel that they're owed. So there is a Medicaid payback on a first party special needs trust. So that's why we want to direct it to a third party, because there is no Medicaid payback on a third party special needs trust. So far, just a recap, what I've told you is that you can have, if you're single, you can have $2,000 to your name and qualify for SSI, one house, one car. If you're married, you can have $3,000 to your name, one house, one car. And the exceptions to that is that you can have money in a first party or a third party special needs trust. And actually you can have any amount in a third party or a first party special needs trust. And then also you can have money in an ABLE account, ABLE, A-B-L-E, under the 529 tax code 529A for ABLE. That's another place that you can have money. Okay. So, so we've kind of just talked about that. So how do we fund our care, and how do we make sure that it's funded properly? So we got the special needs trust, first party and third party. One way that we fund care, life insurance and other assets. So in life insurance, basically, you can have enough money to fund the future care of your child, and depending on your child's age and life expectancy and other things, we can do that calculation. We do future care calculations for special needs families. But basically, you can have the assets directly and be able to fund your child's future care, which usually equates to millions of dollars. Or a lot of families need those assets in their own retirement, where they're going to be retired for 25 to 35 years. And so they have life insurance on each of their lives that will fund the special needs trust. The special needs trust is the beneficiary. So upon the parent's death, the life insurance proceeds pay to fund the special needs trust. And then you continue paying, prior to the death, you continue paying your special care expenses just like you always have. So that's another way. And then, of course, we have the ABLE account. So what you need to know about the ABLE account is the beneficiary is the account owner. The income earned is not taxable, and contributions are not deductible, but it does not jeopardize SSI, Medicaid, or other public programs. Excuse me. I think I talk too much, and then I get winded. So the ABLE account is achieving a better life for an individual with a disability. Anna, do we have a question in the Q&A?
Yes, you do have a question in the Q&A. Would you like for me to read it? It says, can you get Medicaid as an adult without the Medicaid waiver if denied SSI?
The answer is yes, maybe. There's 103 programs, so you got to go to that website and check that out. And it just depends. It depends on your disability. It depends if you're pregnant. It depends on your finances. So once you go to that website and you create your username and password, it will basically tell you any programs that you may be eligible for. So it will take some time, and it is a little bit frustrating to see if you qualify, but just mark it down that it could take you an hour, or so to go through that process. And then once you've gone through the process, then they're going to ask you for a boatload of documents that might take you another hour or two to put together that you'll have to upload. But it will tell you what programs you are eligible for and will allow you to apply for them. Okay. So any other questions, or we're good for right now?
We're good. There
Okay.
are no other questions.
So again, with the ABLE account, basically this was organized under the 529A for ABLE. We've heard of 529s before. For 529C is basically what we've heard. But you can have an ABLE account. If your disability started prior to age 26, you can have an ABLE account. Contributions can be made by anyone, including the disabled person. It's $15,000 a year. Funds in an ABLE account can't have more than $100,000 in them, or you will disqualify for SSI. So technically an ABLE account, I think, and it changes every year, but I think you could actually have up to $400,000 in an ABLE account. However, after $100,000, you disqualify for SSI. So $15,000 a year, and you can put an additional $12,490 if the person is working. There's tax-free growth on investments, and you can change the investments up to twice a year. And distributions for a qualified disability expense are not taxable. So what is a qualified disability expense? Basically, if it can be construed as achieving a better life for an individual with a disability, you can pay for it out of an ABLE account. If it can be construed as achieving a better life for an individual with a disability, so this could be anything. It could be a vacation, it could be a phone, it could be a car, it can be food and shelter. So one question that we get all the time is, why do I need an ABLE account if I have a special needs trust? Why would I do that? If I can have an unlimited amount of money in a special needs trust, and I can only have up to $100,000 in an ABLE account, one of the biggest reasons people use the ABLE accounts is for basically for the food and shelter element of it. So you can pay rent, you can pay mortgage payments and things out of an ABLE account. You don't pay monthly debt service, rent, and mortgage payments out of a special needs trust. So depending if a person is living in a facility and depending how that care is billed, whether it's billed under medical or it's billed under housing or room and board or things like that, that is one reason you might need an ABLE account. Now, I told you the first party special needs trust has a Medicaid payback on it. The ABLE account also has a Medicaid payback on it. So at the death of the individual, the state Medicaid could come in and take reimbursement back for expenses paid by Medicaid. The third party special needs trust that we talked about, this is where we leave money to our special needs child for their benefit. The third party special needs trust does not have a Medicaid payback. So a couple of things to know. If you already have a 529C for this disabled child, you can convert a 529C to an A, but you can only do $15,000 a year. Another thing to know about a 529A versus a 529C is an A can pay for a lot more educational services. An A can pay for college, but it also can pay for tutoring and a lot of other things that the C cannot pay for. So that is a service that we can provide. We do the conversions of the 529Cs to the A's if somebody has the need for that. Now, another thing that I will tell you also is the 529C that you have in your disabled child's name, you're the owner of that. They might be the beneficiary, but as long as funds are not distributed to said child, it shouldn't be used against them for SSI because you're the owner. They're not. Once they turn 18, you're the owner. They are not. Also, you, mom and dad, as the owner of the 529C, you do have the ability to change the beneficiary to your other child that might go to college that is not disabled as well. So you do have some flexibility with that as well. Additional questions, Anna?
Yes, you have questions in the chat, and there's one in the Q&A. The one in the Q&A asks, how does one establish an ABLE account?
There are multiple ways that you can establish an ABLE account. We establish ABLE accounts for our clients all the time. There is a number of different websites. It doesn't matter what state you live in or what state that you purchase. We have some particular ABLE accounts that we like better than others. Some of them are a little bit more restrictive in how you get the money out. So you have to read carefully. They're all organized under the ABLE law, but they're all not, the plans and the administration of the plans are not all created equally. So that's something that we can help you with. There's services that you can find online as well. So I see one that says, what do I do if I'm denied SSI at 18? Yes. So if denied SSI at 18, there is a process of appealing. Sometimes people get denied and it was just a misunderstanding. Sometimes they got denied because your PCP never got around to sending the medical records that the Social Security Administration asked for. Or sometimes they got denied because the Social Security Administration sent a records request to the dermatologist when it should have been the neurologist or something silly. I mean, I've really seen some really silly reasons why an application was denied. So first things first, don't get discouraged. This is a service. We do have services in helping people apply. It's a paid for service. We like to empower people because they can apply for themselves and kind of go through this process themselves, but we can be an advocate and can kind of help you through the process. But again, read the letter, pay attention to the dates on the letter, file the appeal within the timeline, but get to the root of why they were denied, and if it was an error or if an error in records or whatever. What is the best cost-effective route to guardianship, especially for a low-income family on Medicaid and SSI. And I'm gonna let you put that in the chat box. There's Disability Rights Texas, and there's like a legal aid society that may have either reduced or free. If you live in Galveston County, I heard Galveston has a huge grant for for people out there, and they've been doing free guardianship. But I've also heard they won't return calls either, so I think they might be overwhelmed. Can a disabled adult child have a first party and a third party special needs trust? And the answer is yes, they absolutely can. Sometimes it's necessary, sometimes it's not. And it just, like my daughter has both. She has a first party and a third party, but she has some first party money that has to go into a first party trust. So that's, you know, when you would definitely have to do that. Okay, so we have, if I miss the appeal time, what is next? If you miss the appeal time, you've got to go, you've got to call back to the Social Security Administration, because I don't really know. They're pretty, I'm sorry about this, I missed my slideshow here. They're pretty sticklers on that, on the dates as far as appealing. So I don't know if they'll allow you to kind of go through a new application, or if there's a timeline or something like that, but you definitely are going to have to call back to them to see what you've got to do. And they may extend a little bit of grace because they're so far behind. So honestly, they, you know, if you send it in, they're not in the office and they're not looking at things as quickly as they used to. So they may extend a little bit of grace there as well. Okay, so here's some things, just quick things before we wrap up and take any last questions. This is some things that an ABLE account can pay for. Again, the big one is the housing and rent is what an ABLE account can pay for. Things is food and shelter. SSI is currently $794 a month, as long as you have a rent or a fair share agreement in place. Otherwise, I think it's $522. But it's not enough to pay for all the food and shelter that your loved one might need. So an ABLE account can pay for things like that. And here are some things that basically a special needs trust can pay for. So it's extensive. And honestly, the list of what an ABLE account can pay for, it can be this extensive as well, because again, on an ABLE account, if it can be construed as achieving a better life for an individual with a disability, it can be paid for. But this is just an example. So basically, food and shelter is not what we're paying for out of that special needs trust, because SSI is designed to pay for that. Okay, so a couple of wrap-up things. Yeah, I think it's really important to develop a future care plan and now to identify how much cost, what is it going to look like, how much money is it going to cost for the future care of my child. We can help families develop their future care plan and future cost care plans. When it comes to what happens to you when you're gone, you know, I think you've got to look at that. Who are the future caregivers? Is there a partial residential? Is there, you know, is there some type of group home? Is there a host home or other things like that? And I would just say, really think about considering touring some of these facilities, whether for a respite or whether for long-term in the future, because the waiting list can be 5 years or longer. And we always give the reminder to make special considerations before naming siblings as a future caregiver. Siblings have hopes and dreams to get married, to have kids, to have a house, to graduate college, to have a fulfilling career. All of the hopes and dreams a person can have, they have them too. And if they have to be the caregiver for their loved one, they might not be able to fulfill those. We do not mind seeing siblings as a future trustee, and maybe a guardian that will help identify that care and set up outside care. Okay, so we talked about a lot of things today and during our time together, and all of the things here on the list are something that should be on your radar. We have webinars on all of these topics, so do go out to our YouTube channel and check them out. One thing that I did not mention, and I want to, it's super, super important. In the state of Texas, in the example of divorce. In the state of Texas, oftentimes, not always, and if you don't get it, I'm sorry, but oftentimes child support will continue post age 18 if the child has disabilities. Child support will be considered income once they turn 18, and you can get denied for SSI right off the bat because you've got child support coming in post age 18. So how do you fix that? This is a really good thing to know. You work with an attorney, work with the ex-spouse, and all you got to do is you got to get the child support redirected to a first party special needs trust. So child support, income of the said child would go to a first party special needs trust. Any settlements like lawsuit settlements or things like that would go to a first party. But child support will need to be redirected to a first party special needs trust or it will be counted against them for SSI purposes. So that is one of the most common things that people don't know, or they learn the hard way, or in a nightmare example, I've seen where the adult child got approved for SSI and Medicaid, and they were clipping along and getting paid. And let's say they got paid for a couple of years, and then Social Security swoons in and says, "Oh, snap, you've been getting child support. You owe us all this money back." And that can happen. It does happen. I've seen it. I've seen some real nightmare cases. So just get that taken care of on the front end. Again, this is not a do-it-yourselfer. You need to work with an attorney on that, and it needs to be approved by a judge. All of this stuff as it relates to planning is not really a do-it-yourselfer. You've got a specialized situation which needs specialized care. We're specialized in special needs financial planning. So we're the money, we're the funding, the future funding. We have specialized software specifically for Social Security analysis to tell you when and how to take it and how to maximize your benefits for you, your spouse, and for your disabled adult child. In fact, we have the only software out there that takes that into consideration for disabled adult children. So really, it's all about kind of where you are and where you're going. It's not about where you've been. We're happy to help any way that we can. You can follow us on Facebook and see other webinars. You can go to our YouTube channel, and all of our webinars are out there. But as it relates to your unique situation, if we can be of help, reach out to us directly. We're happy to help any way that we can. Anna, I've got 1 o'clock, and I'm going to turn it right over to you. Do we have any last minute quick questions that we want to?
We don't have any last minute questions. I just plugged in your website so that our participants can visit your website, and also check out our website as well for free resources and information. Also on that transition age, that's so important. We need so much information when it comes to transition. I just want to thank everyone. I want to thank Allison for sharing all this information. We will send out the presentation and the recording to everyone who registered to attend. And I know it's a lot of information. I mean, every time I hear Allison talk, I'm like taking notes and trying to keep up with everything. It's a lot of really great information, and Allison is the best. We have so many of her presentations, and we're so happy to collaborate with Allison and Consolidated Planning Group. So just want to thank everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Everyone have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.